I'm Cameron Bertuzzi. Welcome to Capturing Christianity. Today I'm joined by Joe Schmid, friend of mine. He's over at Majesty of Reason, and today we're talking about, this is more of a Q&A, just philosophy of religion, kind of an open-ended, anything to do with philosophy of religion. If you've got a question for either of us, myself or for Joe, leave it in the live chat. We'll put it up on the screen. And we've actually got a few that have come in already, so why don't we just go ahead and jump in. I will mention, though, that I've got Joe's channel, or Spider-Man, Tom Holland, whatever you want to call him. His link, the link to his channel is in the description of the video, so go check out his work. Lots of awesome stuff. He and I have done videos together on this channel. You definitely want to go check him out if you don't know who he is or what he's doing. But let's jump into some questions. We had one, and we were talking about it a little bit before we went live, which was, well, let me do this one first, from Elau Chess. Did they mean to write overwhelmingly biased in the title? The title says overwhelmingly based Q&A, or philosophy of religion Q&A. And so I think he may just not be familiar with the terminology, because he clarified it in a later comment. And he's like, okay, well, I don't know what they're talking about then. Well, tell us what based means, Joe, because you're younger. Based is actually like, it's probably like, it was before my time, or it's after my time. What's the way to put it? Yes, after my time. But inform the audience. What does based mean?
Yeah. Well, I will say first that that was Cameron's idea to have that as a title. That was not my idea. But I will.
No, you told me you suggested overwhelmingly based, or like something like that, and so that's why I changed it.
Oh, you changed it to overwhelmingly. That's hilarious.
Yeah, originally it was.
I saw your first title. I didn't suggest putting based in there to begin with, but once you did it, I was like, let's run with it, okay? So I guess I'll be the Urban Dictionary. I guess it means like super cool, like, and kind of like somewhat edgy, but like super cool. That's how I understand it. But also, it just works in any context, you know? It's an approving word. It's like
super
you cite
awesome.
something approvingly. Yeah, like super awesome, but also somewhat edgy. Yeah.
Somewhat edgy. Yeah, okay, let's move on to another question. This one's from Monkey Boy. Are you guys aware of Skydive Phil documentary on the Kalam? So we were talking about this a little bit before we went live, and you are familiar with it. I haven't watched it yet. And a lot of people have actually, I'm getting messages from people daily asking me to respond to this video. Like I think I had like 2 yesterday, 1 the day before. I think someone messaged me today about it. I'm like, look, guys, I don't just have time to do everything all the time and to do all the response videos. Like I have to do what I can do. I've got my own like calendar of content that I'm trying to put out. And so this other video, I'm sure it's great. And Joe's going to talk about it in just a second. But like I have my own things that I want to do on my channel. So maybe that's something that I'll look into. But what I would suggest, if you're really interested in their documentary, you want to see some theists respond to it, then why don't you put something together? I mean, it's always an option to have someone else, and that's actually kind of like where I've been, what I've been leaning toward on this particular video is like, there's a lot of opportunity here for new apologists, new YouTubers to get their feet dirty, their hands dirty. I'm like terrible with these phrases. It's a good opportunity for someone else to respond to it and maybe get into the game that way. Anyways, but Joe, you've seen the video. Tell us about your thoughts on the quality of the video. I know you said you liked most of it.
Yeah. So if I had like an adjective to describe the quality of the video as a whole, I would say excellent. I did think it was excellent. Now, the very end of the video where they covered the causal principle, I did not find plausible. I had many objections to what they said at the end. They were floating things like, perhaps there are circles of causation, which I think ultimately amounts to self-causation. They were floating ideas of, virtual particles coming into existence uncaused as a potential counterexample to the causal principle. I don't think that's a counterexample. I think that it's just a case of indeterministic causation from prior quantum states of the system in question. So at the end, at the very end, this was the very end, they talked about the causal principle, and I didn't quite like that section. But 95% of their video was very good, very well researched. They were citing actual responses by philosophers, Wes Morriston, Alex Malpass, and so on. And an interesting thing about this video that a lot of people probably don't know is that they had professional consultants for the video. So one of my friends who is a philosopher of physics, they had him as a consultant for the stuff about the scientific models of the origin of the universe, big bounce cosmologies, cyclical cosmologies, and so on. So they had professional consultancy there, and they also had professional consultancy with regard to the philosophical aspects of the Kalam. And they had like Alex Malpass, for instance, as a philosophical consultant. And so it was very well put together. They were citing responses in the literature, and in general, it was very good. And for people who are curious to check a lot of the replies that they made in further detail, if they want to check those out further, they can check out my Kalam playlist, because I've had like Malpass on my channel to go into depth about the responses to Hilbert's Hotel and sixth edition arguments. I've had Wes Morriston on my channel, and so on. So anyway, overall excellent. I did not like the end, I have to be honest, but yeah.
Okay, there it is. And I haven't watched it myself, so I can't really comment on it other than seeing like the thumbnail and title and stuff and kind of being intrigued. But then like I saw that it was 50 something minutes long. I was like, I'm going to have to put a whole lot of effort into watching something like this. And so I just haven't done it yet. And I may get around to it eventually, but I've just got, like I said, I've got other things going on my end. So, all right. Next question is from Paul Lager Wage. Okay. I don't know how to say this.
Anyways, here's, no, I don't know.
Lagawai. All right, his question is, what area in philosophy or religion is the most promising to you, or are you most excited about? I'm gonna give this one to you because I'm not actively working in the field. I think that would fit you better. So what are you like? What are some of the new things that you're seeing?
Yeah, so what's difficult is that philosophers, I mean, this is a thing in all of academia, but philosophers hyper specialize, right? So like, yeah. You don't just study philosophy, you study philosophy of religion, but you don't just study philosophy of religion, you study a particular argument. Like most people specialize in a particular argument or a few arguments or areas in that. So for instance, Liz Jackson, right? She works on the relationship between faith, belief, credence, all that kind of stuff, and also Pascal's wager. So she's like zooming in on those things. I myself zoom in on things like models of God and also on like traditional like Thomistic cosmological arguments and things like that. So we all kind of have hyper focalized lenses through which we're viewing these things. I guess for me, something that I find really exciting that's on the edge of a lot of research is like stage 2 of cosmological arguments. There is a lot going. There's a lot that has not been said about that in the literature, and people are just starting to kind of scratch the surface there. There's a lot more work being put into things like the argument from limits. There's like certain papers being written and things like that. Koons has urged people to delve into this further. I just think this is an area that's pretty exciting because not much work has been done on it, firstly. And secondly, there's a lot of opportunities to kind of probe this question of what is, granted that there's some kind of foundation or maybe some kind of uncaused thing or maybe some kind of necessary thing, what would that have to be like? Would it have to be theistic? Could it be naturalistic? Is a naturalistic explanation better than a theistic? And Oppie has recent papers on this. There's been papers in religious studies, like just published within the last few months covering this. I've got some papers under review covering this. So that's one of my most exciting things and one of the exciting things in the field. So yeah, what about you?
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say that I agree on that. The last point that you made there is that like that's an area that's super exciting for me. I mean, I've defended a stage 2 argument in my debate with Stephen Woodford, and so I think that it's a really exciting area. So yeah, I mean, I don't have anything else to add beyond that. I wish I could say more on the problem of evil. I mean, I feel like the animal theodicy stuff is really like that may be an area of growth where we're going to see a lot more growth in the coming years because more emphasis has been put on the human side of suffering. But in recent years, it's kind of shifted focus to the animals. And so I think we're going to see a lot more. I mean, there's already a good amount of literature that currently exists, and just most people just aren't familiar, like don't even know that it exists. So there is literature out there, but I think that people are going to be more interested in coming up with theodicies that explain beyond just humans. That sort of like these really grand like multiverse theodicies and stuff that cover kind of everything. It's like they're trying to take everything into account instead of just like free will or the value of humans, stuff like that. So I think animal suffering is going to be another one of these areas besides stage 2.
I do want to say like a few other things. So firstly, like almost every area of philosophy of religion is indeed kind of like blossoming, and there's really new research and cool stuff on all that, relationship between God and time, the nature of God, like all these different sorts of things, even certain modal cosmological arguments, and even the fine-tuning argument, like all these places are having, just because I just want the audience to know that just because Cameron and I mention a certain area that is kind of blossoming and interesting us, that doesn't mean that these other areas aren't blossoming and so on. I know you said the problem of evil. One of my favorite professors that I have here at Purdue is Paul Draper, and he has a book manuscript, a long-awaited book manuscript on the problem of evil. I think it's with Cambridge University Press. It's either Cambridge or Oxford, and that's hopefully going to be out within the next coming years or something like that. So pretty soon, I think.
What is it? I mean, is it like an overview, or what is it?
So I think what he's doing is well, I'd have to ask him a little bit further, and I'm not sure if I can share too much about it, but I've only talked with him just a little bit about it, and I think he's, because he's big on the kind of Bayesian stuff. So I think he's going to be developing some new Bayesian type arguments from evil and defending old ones that he's defended and looking at extant and new objections to it that have been raised, for instance, by Trent Doherty and so on. So he's definitely going to focus on animal suffering, I believe, in there, and he's going to look at the afterlife responses and so on. So I'm really excited for it, and I think a lot of the people in the philosophical community are, because he's one of the best non-theist philosophers of religion. So,
yeah, and I think most people recognize that too. Most people who appreciate philosophy, I suppose. Okay, we've got some super chats that have come in. So here's an interesting one from Venerage. Okay.
Venerage, yeah.
Round 2 of Joe and Canadian Catholic, please, Cam. No.
Yeah, I'm not going to comment. I'm not going to comment further.
Yeah, that's it on that. But thanks for sending in a super chat either way. All right, Wade Tistammer to Joe. Thoughts on Maverick Christian's most recent video, which commented on one of your articles involving intrinsic properties and the KCA, Kalam Cosmological Argument. Did you watch that video? First of all,
I haven't yet.
That's kind of important.
Yet.
Okay.
Yeah, no, unfortunately, I haven't yet. And I'm wondering which article it is. Is it? So when someone says article, I think my published articles. So I'm wondering if he means my one in Air Kentness, where I talk about causal finitism and so on. But he might be referring to just one of my blog posts. So he might be referring to one of my blog posts. I can check it out later. So and then I could probably direct message him some thoughts if he wants. So, but
yeah, let's do
promises because I've got homework and stuff. So
yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for sending in your super chat, Wade. Okay, let's find. We've already did the skydive fill. Overwhelmingly biased. Let me take these off my list here. So this is a really important question. How are you guys? From Philadelphia Collins. I'm doing well. I'm doing really well. What about you, Joe? I mean, you're over COVID, I assume.
Yeah, I'm doing well enough. So a lot of people don't know, but yeah, I had COVID in early January, and so I mean, I don't have any symptoms right now, but still getting.
Well, you're an anti-masker. You're anti-vaccine. So
yeah, totally. Yeah, no.
That's why you got it.
Yeah, for everyone, just clarity's sake, that was a joke. So yeah, I mean, I was double vaccinated, so it wasn't too terrible, but still got me a little hard. So, but anyway, I'm better now for the most part.
I'm curious, what were your symptoms?
Yeah, so on the first day I had weak and sore muscles, and it was difficult to walk. And then the second day,
couldn't play soccer.
Yeah. Oh no. The second day I was really tired, and also I had some congestion, sore throat, just a very minor sore throat, which was nice. Nice. I mean, it wasn't super terrible, which is good. And then the rest of it was just a lot of congestion. So and some coughing as well. Yeah.
So you didn't lose taste or smell or anything?
No, not at all. I didn't have any.
Dude,
of that.
I lost mine, and it was very strange. It was really weird.
Dude, okay. Kane B, who is one of my favorite YouTube channels, Kane B, he puts out philosophy content. I love it. And he was telling this story because he recently got COVID as well. And he was telling this story because he suspected that he lost his smell. Okay. And so he wanted to test it. And so he goes to his spice cupboard and he's opening up the paprika, and he gives a huge sniff, and he couldn't smell anything. He goes to the oregano, and he smells it. Can't smell anything. He goes to the pepper. Does that, and he can't smell anything. And he just does this for 5 other things. And then he starts crying his eyes out. It's like he starts like tearing up, is like terribly, and he had realized that, oh yeah, I just snorted spices. And like he hadn't realized that because he can't smell anything.
Can't smell.
So he was just like he was crying his eyes out. His like nose was super painful. But anyway, so warning, people, don't do that if you lose your sense of smell as well as your taste.
Here's a better way to test it, and this is what I did, is to just go smell some candles. Like if you got to have candles in the vicinity, but same thing with spices. You got to have spices in the vicinity. But I smelled a candle and I blew it out because you can smell the smoke and stuff, and that's really strong usually after you blow a candle out. So I blew it out and I smelled it and I was like, I don't smell a thing. It's like, okay, I definitely have COVID. It was super strange. But yeah, it's been a few months for me now, and I've got all my taste and smell back. It actually took months. Like it took months to get back.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I've heard that. Wow, that's crazy. I've heard that different variants have slightly different symptoms. So you probably got one of the earlier variants, and I got one of these later variants where it's just like.
Well, I got the Delta, I think. When Delta was super popular, like that's when I got it.
Yeah, I probably got Omicron or however you pronounce it or whatever.
Yeah, and I heard that it's like the symptoms are less intense on that one. But it still sucks.
I mean, it's different for everybody. Everybody's different. So, and mine were like kind of not fun, but it's fine.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we only have an hour with Joe today, so let's get to another question from Jose Guedes. He says, "Hey Joe, what do you think about Joshua Siddiwati's work on grounding in the existence of God?" Who is that in the background?
Well,
are you in the bathroom? Or?
No, yes, we're both in the bathroom right now. It's how college kids do their stuff.
Right.
Yeah. So no, this is my room. That's a towel rack as well. Oh, there's another towel rack. I'm kind of obscuring it. So I think do we? Yes, we do. Yeah, you can see it. Okay. Anyway.
What? Yeah. Why do you have two towel racks on your door?
It's like some bourgeois. You get it because you're in the high class. But no,
I see. Okay.
Yeah. We had to like enslave some proletariat workers for it, but. Okay, now back to the question of Siddiwati. Let's see. Yeah, I think it's interesting.
I just want to make his face.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So what I think is that, you can always run. So Graham Oppie, when it comes to cosmological arguments, he tries to argue that for any global causal structure of reality, naturalism is going to have an explanatory parity with theism and an ontological simplicity, a greater ontological simplicity compared to theism. So, for instance, if you have a first cause, say, for Oppie, he's going to say that that's something like an initial state of the universe. Maybe it's causally initial, maybe it's temporally initial. But what he's going to say is that it's just a causal state of the universe, whereas the theist has not only that causal state of the universe, but appended to that, outside of the universe, as it were, is God. And so Oppie's going to try to say that naturalism in that sense is going to be simpler. And he goes through this in his recent debate book with Kenny Pierce, something like Is There a God? A Debate, something like that, which I recommend people check out. Now, I think that Oppie is going to apply that kind of response to general cosmological type arguments to this kind of grounding work that Siddiwati has been doing. So one thing that Siddiwati focuses on is these grounding type relations, right? Now, what Oppie's going to say is like, well, hey, both of us have this, with respect to physical reality, both of us have a fundamental layer. Let's say maybe it's the quantum field, some kind of foundational quantum field, some kind of foundational quantum, maybe foundational universal wave function or something. Whatever it is, both Siddiwati and Oppie are going to have that in their ontology. But what Oppie's going to say is, that's all. I'm going to take that as fundamental, and that's going to be the ultimate ground of the non-fundamental things. Again, this is something that Oppie could say. And then Oppie's going to say that, well, what's Siddiwati doing? He's appending to this series a further thing, namely God, and God's going to be that ultimate grounding explanation. And so Oppie's probably going to say that you get the same explanatory payoff under a naturalist view, but with greater simplicity or greater parsimony. And so Oppie's going to say he's going to want to prefer the naturalistic proposal. Now, I still haven't made up my mind about which of those two explanations is to be preferred, partly because I think it's going to depend on a whole concoction of other explanatory factors that we need to be taking into account, like potential fine-tuning, potential aspects of what's being grounded, like minds and consciousness and moral knowledge and other sorts of things. But, I mean, I will say that it's definitely interesting, the argument that he gives, and it pushes the naturalist and the theist to compare their theories really nicely. So if we compare the theories, right? But anyway, that's my thoughts right now. I mean, I will admit that I have some difficulties with his overall model of God. He was just on Parker Pensie's channel, and he was explaining how he's super innovative, but like he has an ontological pluralist view where God exists in different modes or different ways. So he has a mode of being that is temporal, mutable, passable, and like it's temporal, mutable, passable, and non-simple. Okay, and that's kind of his immanent way of being. And then he has another way of being or mode of existing in which he's timeless, impassable, absolutely simple, and so on, immutable, blah blah blah, right? And so he's kind of getting a synthesis between a kind of neoclassical view that Ryan Mullins would hold and a classical theistic view that someone like Thomas Aquinas would hold. So it's very innovative. I will give him that. But I don't know. It just seems a little extravagant to me. I have to admit. I mean, I know that's a little bit of a cheap shot, but there's much more that you could say about that. I mean, I think that ontological pluralism is implausible in the first place. I have a video with Trent Merrick's on my channel, Ontological Monism, where he's defending a paper. Or he's defending a paper in my video that I had with him. So anyway, I advise people to check that out. You get into the weeds really quickly, as you can see.
Well, Siddiwati is actually going to be on the channel this Thursday with Josh Rasmussen. So I'm hoping that Rasmussen, I'm hoping that Josh can distill some of the ideas. Because for me, it's really difficult to follow. It's Siddiwati, because they're both Josh. Siddiwati's idea, his grounding paper, when we were working through it on the channel, I was like, you're losing me every other sentence. I don't know what you're talking about. So I'm hoping to have Josh on, because I'm a very visual thinker, so not necessarily a visual learner, but as long as I can visualize how all the pieces fit and everything, and the grounding relations, I've got to be able to picture that and how it all works. And it was difficult to paint a picture in my mind when I was listening to him talk. So I'm hoping that on Thursday, Rasmussen's going to help to just distill some of these ideas down, and then maybe there's a lot of overlap between them two as well, because Siddiwati was explaining to me that his original idea was basically a different type of contingency argument where he's focusing on fundamentality. So he's any non-fundamental thing has an explanation, and that gets you to a fundamental thing that I think. Anyways, I'm not remembering everything, all the details right now, but there's what I do remember is that there's a lot of overlap between Rasmussen's work and Siddiwati's work. So I'm just really excited about Thursday. Let's not take any more time. Let's get to some more questions. I just want to make one quick caveat. Okay. With respect to that ways of being view that I was just articulating, where God has an immanent way or mode of being and a transcendent way or mode of being, one of which is the neoclassical theistic picture of God, and the other of which is the classical theistic picture of God. I'm not saying that is Siddiwati's view, that Siddiwati would plant a flag and defend that. I'm saying that is one proposal that he has offered in terms of understanding what God could be like. And he talks about that with his interview on Parker's Pensée. So I advise people to check that out. But I don't want people to get the sense that I am definitively attributing this as the certain view that Siddiwati holds. It could just be a kind of a toy model, So anyway, I just wanted to say that. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that's totally fair. All right. Here's a question from... it's in some other language. It looks like maybe even Russian. Question for both. Any recommendations on studying philosophy by my own? I'm still in high school, so I'd love to hear advices from you guys. So I'll start this one. So I didn't study philosophy formally at all. I didn't go to college for it or anything. I have a bachelor's degree in science and audio production. So that's the extent of my formal education beyond high school. So and basically the way that I got into it was just by reading books. And that's one of the reasons why I haven't actually gone, because people have offered to pay, give me a complete full ride scholarship to their school, and they're the president of the school, so obviously they can set that up, and it's partly because the channel is so well known now. If I did that and I advertise it and stuff, it'd be really good for the school. That's not really necessary for the point I'm trying to make. But the reason why I haven't gone to school, even though I could just do a full ride, is because it's not necessarily necessary to do that if your goal is to grow in knowledge. Because what you can do is you can just buy books, and you can even you can hook up with a professor, or maybe even a an ex-professor who used to be a professor in philosophy of religion and just ask them for a reading list of like books that you should read. And you can definitely learn as much as you would getting a full degree just by reading books on your own. The difference, the difficulty when you're an autodidact, when you're like someone who just tries to do it all yourself, the difficulty is that you don't have like, there's no one else that is sort of pushing you. You don't have much motivation in some cases to read what you need to read in order to really have a competent grasp. And also, obviously, you don't get like any of the accolades or degrees that come with, you know, an accredited degree from a school. So you don't have that by your name. You can't say that like, you know, even if you have the same amount of knowledge as someone who does, you don't have that by your name. So that's like kind of a downside. But if it's really just about knowledge for you, then you can do it just by reading books. But like I said, there are some barriers, some obstacles in the way, which is like kind of based on yourself. It's like, how disciplined can you be on your own when you have like a school-like structure there that's like forcing you to, you know, to take tests and to grade and stuff like that is, you can say that it's better. I think it really depends on you and what your goals are. But yeah, I think that's pretty much, those are my thoughts. What about you, Joe?
Yeah, so that was all quite excellent advice. So I have a few things to add. And I've said this in one of my videos, like I think I gave like 7 tips, and I think I have them, I tried pulling them up while you were giving your answer. So I said this in my like 3K AMA video or whatever, when someone asked me a similar question. So one thing that I would say, or the first thing that I'd say, so I'm just going to go through my 7 tips. The first thing that I'd say is like definitely read, right? Read. Good philosophy, both sides of an issue. Okay, don't just take notice, moreover, of the issues themselves when you're reading, but also take notice of how the authors think about and explore the issues. Like think about how they evaluate the arguments, not just what they say, the content of what they're saying, but try to figure out how are they evaluating the arguments. Are they saying this is question begging? Well, what do they mean by that? What is the current dialectical context? Who has the onus of justification or the burden of proof, and so on? So try to explore the issues, yes, but also when you're doing so, when you're reading, take notice of the strategies, the methods, the tools that the authors are using to evaluate claims, to evaluate arguments, and so on, and try to incorporate those into your own thinking, into your own writing, into your own engaging with reading, as well as in your own sort of conversations, debates, and so on. Now, I also recommend, so what should you read, right? Well, there's a lot of stuff to read that's good philosophy. I would recommend checking out, so I have a video called What is Philosophy? And I put this video together for people who have this question of, I'm trying to get into philosophy. What should I read, right? I'm trying to be a good critical thinker with respect to philosophy. I want to be able to follow these debates. I want to be able to like come up with arguments of my own and evaluate sophisticated arguments put forward by professional philosophers. What should you do? Well, go to this video and look at the book recommendations that I have at the end. I think I give like 13 different book recommendations, and they include things like The Philosopher's Toolkit, David Papineau's Philosophical Devices. I have a book, The Majesty of Reason, A Short Guide to Critical Thinking in Philosophy, which will definitely help you. And they all basically just serve to introduce you and guide you through the subject in a way that teaches you about not just what to think, but how to think about these sorts of philosophical topics. That's the first thing that I'd say, read. The second thing that I'd say is discuss, right? Surround yourself with people who are smarter and more well-read than you, and discuss with them, right? That's what's nice about like a classroom setting, because you're the professor and you can go to office hours, and a lot of times your peers will also be super interested in it. But you can also find this online, right? You can find forums, you can find discussion groups on Facebook, you can email professors, you can direct message people, and you'll be able to get conversations going. The key thing is to surround yourself with people who are smarter and more well-read than you. The third thing that I say is, well, when you're writing, try to write as clearly as possible, as concisely as possible, and precisely as possible. So, plausible, I think I said that. So don't include any fluff in your writing, like, oh, ever since the dawn of time, humans have thought about the mind. And you're like, no, don't include that. Instead, so don't do that fluff. And when you're writing, signpost, tell your reader where you are going. Say, I have 3 arguments for this. Here's my first argument. My first premise is this. My justification for that first premise is this. It sounds kind of boring, but it's so clear when you're reading it. And you can like weave this into a little bit more of a narrative structure, but try to signpost. So when you're writing philosophically, and get feedback from others who are smarter than you.
I try to do that in my videos too.
Yeah,
signposting.
Exactly.
Yeah, like the video that I did on responding to Alex, a whole bunch of signposting throughout the whole thing.
Yes. It's so crucial. Oh my goodness. It helps with clarity. It helps with organization. You're like, listen, I just covered 3 responses to his response to my first argument. So like, it helps people track the dialectic because we miss out on that so much. We
Yeah.
forget to see all the steps that we took to get us to this little nook and cranny in the dialectic. So that's the third thing that I would say is with respect to your writing. Be sure to write clearly, precisely, concisely, signpost, don't add fluff. Okay. The next thing that I would say is try to understand whenever you're in a dialogue or discussion, who has the burden of proof, and try not to get lost when you're talking about that, because sometimes person A will give you a positive argument for some kind of conclusion, trying to convince B to accept that conclusion. Now, person B might call into question one of the premises. They might say, well, hey, that premise assumes such and such, but like, why should I accept that such and such? Now, if person A responds, well, why would you think that such and such is false? That is shifting the onus of justification, right? The assumption was in person A's own argument. They need to justify the truth of the assumption. It's not on person B to justify the falsity of the assumption. All they need to do is say, hey, you assumed something and you didn't give sufficient justification for that. So be careful. Always keep track of who has the burden of proof or burden of justification. And just keep track of that. Also know the distinction between rebutting and undercutting defeaters. That's very, very important. So that's the fourth thing. The fifth thing, so again, I'm giving 7. The fifth thing that I would say is consume, right? This is what I always try to do. I always try to consume some kind of quality philosophical content, whether it be on Audible. You can get like a gold membership or whatever. It's something like $12 or $15 a month or something. And you get like unlimited access to like audiobooks. And you can listen to that when you're walking between classes, when you're, I don't know, when you're running, when you are washing your clothes or something. You could just listen, right? Or like listen to YouTube. I have certain lectures on my watch later list or whatever, watch for later, save for later. And I listen to those when I'm walking in between classes. And basically, whenever I have some kind of time when I'm not mentally engaged with something, I listen to philosophy and stuff. So that will help you really kind of refine and hone your thinking skills, even in these times when otherwise you'd just be mindlessly walking to class or something like that. So consume, that's my fifth one. What channels could you consume? Oh, well, of course, Majesty of Reason and Capturing Christianity, but also things like Kane B, right? The Analytic Christian, Parker's Pensies, and so on. So just putting all that out there. Okay, I'm not trying to give an exhaustive list. I would say many, many more. So that's the fifth one. The sixth one is, I'd say, to know logic, right? So you should have a good foundation in propositional logic, like its inference rules, like what is modus ponens, what is modus tollens, what is disjunctive syllogism, and so on. If you want to get into philosophy of religion, just know some basic modal logic. Just like know what the possibility and necessity operators are, know about the various systems, just the basics of them, and so on. So that's the sixth one, know logic. And then seventh, I would say, try to get a good grasp of, I guess, the basic terrain in all areas of philosophy before you make a deep dive into one specific field or topic. That's because any specific topic is usually going to be incorporating a whole host of stuff from epistemology and metaphysics and like all these other disciplines at the same time. So you need a basic grasp of the debates in those other fields. And how are you going to get that basic grasp? Well, I suggest reading those books that I recommended, but also checking out the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy, and this journal called Philosophy Compass. So yeah, those are my 7 tips. I know it was a bit long-winded, but I feel like this could really help people. So
Yeah, no, that was good. And do you have like a book that has an overview of all philosophy? I mean, there's a one on the Christian side of things that's Philosophical Foundations for a Christian Worldview. That one covers like Audible. There you go. It's on Audible, and it covers almost every single facet of philosophy from like an overview perspective. So they don't get, I mean, they can go somewhat deep into certain things, but they don't, I mean, it's supposed to be an overview book, even though it's like, what is it? 700-800 pages long. It's a very thick book. So that's what I would recommend on the Christian side. But is there anything from like a secular perspective along the same lines of a book like that you would recommend?
Yeah. So, I include both of these in the 13 book recommendations that I mentioned earlier, but they are called Philosophy 1, A Guide Through the Subject, and Philosophy 2, Further Through the Subject, or something like that. They're both edited by a philosopher named A.C. Grayling, and they were used as part of the curriculum for, I think it's either like University of London philosophy or something like that, or like Oxford or something. They were used for the curriculum for that for a long time, and they're very good. They basically just contain almost like a small book length treatment of each area of philosophy within these 2 giant books. And they're very accessible. You can understand them, and they're very good. So I recommend both of those, and I think you can get them online. So yeah.
Nice. All right, let's move on to another question. This one is a super chat from Maverick Christian. He sent in another one. He says, Joe, which premise of the eternal society argument against an infinite past do you not accept? Are you familiar with his argument, first of all?
I'm certainly familiar with it. I don't have the premises memorized. Here's the basic thing that I reject in such arguments, or at least I call into question. I don't know if I'd say that it's false. I'd say I just don't think there's sufficient justification for thinking it's true. Okay. I would reject that if there could be an infinite past, then there could be something like a Benedetti paradox. I reject that because you're going to need something like a Patrick principle. I've talked. Yeah. Sorry, I don't accept it. Reject is a little bit ambiguous, but I guess okay. Anyway, good.
Yeah.
So I don't accept that because it's going to rely on something like a Patrick principle to take you from a perfectly benign infinite past to an infinite past which is populated by a paradoxical set of, let's say, Grim Reapers, or a paradoxical set of society members that are making a chant, if and only if none of the earlier ones made a chant, or something like that. I reject that inference because you're going to need something like a Patrick principle, and I think that those are notoriously unreliable. And I think that they have a variety of counterexamples. I mean, even their very inventor or champion, David Lewis, recognized that you need to put restrictions on it because of the counterexamples. So I think he said something like geometry, space and geometry permitting, or something like that. So you have to have certain geometric constraints, spatial constraints, and so on. And I also think that you have to have certain logical constraints in there as well. And I think even the Patrick principle poses challenges for Christianity and theism in particular. I mean, you could just take, let's say, an empty world or an empty universe, which is, I don't even know, 13 billion years old, let's say, and you take an individual possibility, which is just horrendous suffering. So an individual intrinsic possibility that is horrendous suffering, and you just patch that into the world where you just duplicate that. And so all that's in this world is just horrendous suffering. And because we're able to patch up this world, and we're not patching in any... we're not stitching or patching in any outweighing goods that would accrue from that, it would seem as though this world is, it would be unjustified for any perfect being to allow such a horrendous world to obtain. And so even theism makes you put restrictions on the Patrick principle. And so if you're able to do that, it seems to me that you could put logical restrictions on it. And so I think that would debar the construction of the relevant patched up world. It would not allow you to go from the infinite past to a Benedetti paradox, or a construction that is logically inconsistent. Anyway, there's a lot more to say there, but that's what I would say.
Yeah, fair enough. I have some of my own thoughts, but let's move on. So Hallelujah says, have you, Cameron or Joe, heard of Scotism, and the Scotus arguments for God? If not, I recommend the Byzantine Scotus. Am I saying that wrong? Scotus?
Yeah, it's Scotus. So Scotism, Duns, Scotus.
Scotism.
Yes.
Well, obviously I have not.
Yeah, so I know that Timothy O'Connor has written on Scotistic cosmological arguments, and several others have as well. And I think that they're definitely interesting and worth taking into account. They focus more on modality and things like that than, for instance, a more kind of Thomistic cosmological argument might. But I think that a lot of the responses that people like Oppie give, that you can have a naturalistic proposal that's consistent with all the premises and so on. I mean, I think a lot of those responses are going to be transferring over just with some minor changes applying to the particular arguments in question. But that's obviously not to say that I've given a sufficiently representative sampling of them and responses to them and so on. So, yeah.
All right, we've got 20 more minutes. Here's a super chat that was sent in by Noah Kylene. He says, in the context of the contingency argument, how do you understand the difference between a necessary being and a brute fact? The only way that I know how to respond to this is just to simply define what we mean by each of these. Yeah. What would you say? Is that where you would go to?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, I would just say that we have, let's set things aside. Okay, we have on this side modal status. Okay, so we've got modal status. Actually, you know what? Let me draw this out. Let me get out a little. What color should I use? I'm going to use blue. Okay. Blue. Because it's the big blue blob from Josh Rasmussen's work, his YouTube videos where he just takes out some Play-Doh. And okay, let's see if I can draw this. So we got a little box, okay? Yada, yada, yada. Okay, there's our little box, okay? Here we're going to have modal status. So I'm just going to put C for contingent and N for necessary. Okay, so this is your modal status. I'm going to explain what that is in a second. And then up here, you've got your explanatory status. So we're going to say E is explained, so it has an explanation, and not E for not explained. It doesn't have an explanation, okay? So not, that's a little tilde. That just means negation. That's a not. Okay, so we've got our little box, and so then we have EC here. We have EN here. Whoops, that's a terrible E. We have not EC, and we have not EN. Okay, so what is this telling us? So here we have modal status. This just means contingent means it exists in some possible worlds, but not in other possible worlds. So it means that a possible world, what is that? It's a way that reality could be. It's a complete or global or total way that reality could be. So for instance, the actual world is a possible world, but there's also a possible world in which, let's say, I sneezed 10 minutes ago, and that's one of the only minor differences. That would be the full-blown history, everything that's true in that world. That would be a different possible world from our world because it contains something different, namely me sneezing. So anyway, a contingent thing exists in some, but not all possible worlds. So like me, I exist in this world, but there's another possible world in which I don't exist because maybe my parents never even met. So that's what a contingent thing is. It exists in the actual world. If we're talking about actual things, it exists, but it doesn't have to exist. It can fail to exist. A necessary thing, by contrast, exists in all possible worlds. Okay, so no matter which way that reality could be, that thing's going to be in that world, or that truth is going to be true in that world. So something like 1 + 1 = 2. That's a necessary truth because it's true in every possible world. No matter what way the reality could be, it cannot fail to be the case that 1 + 1 = 2. And so if we're talking about things that actually exist, a necessary thing is something that exists and cannot fail to exist, whereas a contingent thing is something that exists but can fail to exist. Okay, that's modal status. Explanatory status, explain just means it has an explanation. There's something that accounts for why it's in reality, why it's there. Not explain means that, no, there's nothing that explains, nothing that accounts for why it's there. And then we can go through the various permutations, right? So an explained contingent thing, that's something that can fail to exist, but that has a further explanation, that's something that accounts for why it's there in the first place. That's like me, right? I'm an explained contingent thing. I could have failed to exist, so I'm contingent, and I'm explained, right? My parents brought me into existence. There's also explained necessary things. So something like, philosophers typically think that sets depend on their elements, right? So a set is just like a collection of things, and without those things, you wouldn't be able to have the collection of those things. So in some sense, sets are derivative from or depend on their members in a way that members don't depend on their sets, right? So there's a set containing Joe. I don't depend on that set, right? That set's there because I'm here. I'm the member, and it's sort of dependent on their being the member in the first place. So, but sets, some sets are necessarily existent, right? So the set containing the natural numbers, right? That's automatically there because the natural numbers are necessary, right? It's not as though the number 1 could somehow like exist on Tuesday but not on Wednesday. No, the number 1 necessarily exists. So we have all the natural numbers; those necessarily exist, and we have the set containing the natural numbers. That's going to necessarily exist, but the set depends on the elements. It's the natural numbers. So it depends on those for the way that it is and it's being there in the first place. So we have an explained necessary thing here. We have a set containing the natural numbers, and that set is explained because it's explained in terms of the more fundamental natural numbers, but it's also necessary. It cannot fail to exist. We also have an unexplained contingent thing. Now, this is a very controversial category. It's debatable whether or not that's even possible to have a contingent thing that's not explained. If you accept the PSR, you reject that there could be something up here in this category. But just in terms of conceptual permutations, that's up there. So I guess some atheists might take the universe to be something that's contingent and not explained. I think J.L. Mackie, for instance, might be an atheist who would say that. I mean, he might also say that the universe is necessary, but it's been a long time since I read his Miracle of Theism. And then finally, you have an unexplained and necessary thing. So this is something that's necessary and that doesn't have a further explanation or further something that accounts for why it's in reality at all. This also might be a controversial category, but some people might say, like, hey, we have to have some kind of ultimate stopping point for explanation, right? Explanations run out at some point. You can't go on ad infinitum giving some kind of further outside explanation for something. And so you just have to bottom out in something that doesn't have a further explanation. And theists would presumably say that would be God, so God might fit into this category, but also atheists might say that the universe might fit into this category. Maybe some kind of foundational quantum field might. But anyway, I hope that this helps you guys think critically about that question. That was my purpose. So I'm done.
That was so good. There's nothing else to add, and we have some other questions to get to, so let's just turn to those now.
Okay.
Let's do that.
I'll try to be a little bit quicker for some of these. And hey, if
no
we need
worries.
to go 10 minutes over, I'm fine with that.
Okay, no, I think we're good. I think we should be good on time. We've got 3 super chats to get through, and then, so we should be okay. All right. Venerage, he sent in another one. He said, for Joe, best book defending atheism and theism.
Okay, good. Best book defending theism is probably the book 24 or so Arguments for God. That's probably the best book defending theism. It's a collection of papers by a bunch of different amazing theistic scholars like Josh Rasmussen, Christopher Weaver, Gregory Menzel, or whatever is. I might be butchering some of these names. William Lane Craig is in there, Swinburne's in there. Basically, everyone and their brother is in there who's a good theist philosopher now. I don't mean to exclude the good theist philosophers who were not included in there. There were a ton. But anyway, my point is just that it's a very good defense of theism. So people pick that up and read it. The best defense of atheism. Oh, that's a good question. I kind of like Jordan Howard. I think that's J.H. Sobel. So Sobel. His book, Logic and Theism. I really like that one. That's probably one of the best. You also have Graham Opies Arguing About Gods. So those two are probably the best, Arguing About Gods and J.H. Sobel's Logic and Theism. But there are tons of other ones that I can't go over, and some of them are just explicitly devoted to the problem of evil. Some of them are explicitly devoted to cosmological arguments. I think the best book on cosmological arguments is Proust and Rasmussen's book Necessary Existence, published in 2018. But yeah, anyway, that's all I'll say.
Yep, there you go. Okay, super chat from Noah Killeen. Oh, we've already gone that one. We've already did that one. Okay, so we only have 2 left.
Okay. I guess I should say a brute fact. I didn't define that because our terms, right? So a brute fact would be, for me, how I define it and how I understand it and how most people in literature define it is just anything in this category with the not E, anything under not E. It's not the case that it has an explanation. So in some sense, it's brute. Now, be careful because some people use brute fact only for this upper category of contingent, not explained. So they would not include this not explained and necessary. They would not include that as a brute fact. So you just have to be careful. You have to define your terms. For me, as I define it, anything brute is just in this category because it doesn't have a further explanation. It's brute. So yeah, anyway. So there could be a brute necessary thing, but there could also be a non-brute necessary thing, and there could be a brute contingent thing. At least that's a conceptual possibility. It's questionable, and I am actually skeptical that that's an actual possibility.
I agree with you. I think that necessary things can be brute as well. So we're in the same boat there. Mm-hmm. Okay, back to Maverick Christian super chat. He sent in 3 today. He said, okay, this one, in your opinion, what are the best arguments for atheism and also theism?
We're going to have to do both of us for this one. So how about you go first?
Okay, yeah, it's kind of easy. So the best argument for theism, in my view, well, how do I want to... Because there's a cheating way, which is just to say cumulative case on both sides. And that's like the cheating way to do it, right? Yeah. So if we can't say that... Okay, so let's say that we can't use that as our answer, okay? So I would say the argument from contingency, that's my favorite pro-theism. And then the best pro-atheism is going to be the problem of evil. Though lately I've been thinking that one is not necessarily the best argument for atheism, like the view that no gods exist. It's more just a good argument against perfect being theism. So that's kind of my view. So if that argument is true, or if that argument is sound, rather, then it is going to provide some evidence for atheism, but it's not going to be like this knockdown proof of atheism. At most, it's going to show that no perfect being exists, or like the omnibenevolent being exists, but it's not going to show that no God exists at all. So that's kind of, but it is like one evidential chip, to use Ben Watkins' language. It is one evidential chip in the favor of atheism. So that's my answer.
This is going to be difficult because that was probably something like my answer too. I think Cameron probably already predicted that. So I'm sympathetic to at least many stage 1 contingency arguments. I am sympathetic to them. I think something like the PSR is plausible. And I think it's plausible that once you have something like the PSR, you're going to get some kind of necessary thing, something like that, necessary concrete thing. The question, of course, is what is its nature, and you can get into that. But at least with respect to stage 1 arguments, I like cosmological arguments from contingency in general. And there are some that are better and more modest than others. So, there are different modal versions, and those can tend to be more modest and even greater in plausibility, because you can have additional supports for the possibility premises and so on. But anyway, I'd probably say something like contingency arguments, to be honest. And then, I'd say something like an evolutionary argument from evil, right? So there have been hundreds of millions of years of animals just ripping each other to shreds, which is kind of like not cool. And, God is just like the providential orchestrator of this. Like, this is the very means by which he brought things into existence. This is the very mechanism, the engine of his creation is suffering and death and things like that. And that seems quite implausible to my mind. But anyway, you can go into much detail about that. And actually, your recent video, I recommend people check that out, because I offered some comments on it, and I enjoyed the video. So, yeah.
You're talking about the one that I did in response to Alex, right?
Yeah, in response to Alex.
Yeah.
And just for people, like, this isn't the end of the debate. Like, there's much more that you can say in response to what Cameron said, and then further responses and so on. And if you're curious, just go into the literature for that, right? Go into Trent Doherty's book, check out, or stay tuned for Paul Draper's book that's coming up, and so on. So.
Yeah, and Alex, he actually, he and I have been talking, and he wants to do a response to my video, and then I'll probably end up doing a response to his. We originally talked about doing a kind of a debate like we did with Stephen Woodford, Professor Woodford,
yeah.
And so we may do something like that with Alex. We'll see. We'll see what happens, but we'll just we'll wait to see what Alex does in response. Okay, Vin of Rage has sent in another super chat, and we've got a few more minutes, so we've got time. He says, "Have you read Opies Book with Joseph W. Kotersky?"
Yeah, Kotersky, yeah.
Kotersky. I have not.
I think, yeah. So I think that's their edited collection, something like Theism and Atheism, Opposing Perspectives in Philosophy, or something like that. I think I butchered the title, but I know exactly which book you're talking about. I've only read a number of papers in that. So there's a sense in which I've read it yet. There's a sense in which I haven't read the whole thing, because when it's an edited collection, usually I read a number of the papers in it, but not absolutely every paper in it. So I've read a number of the papers in that book, yes. Felipe Leon has an especially good entry, or he has two good entries in there on that. One of them is on God and abstract objects, and the other one is on God and causation and sufficient reason, so looking at cosmological arguments, particularly contingency arguments and the Kalam argument. So I recommend checking that out, and Felipe Leon is just awesome. He's super nice. He's just like Josh Rasmussen, and they actually had a dialogue with Palgrave Macmillan, and it was such a good dialogue book. I recommend people check that out. So, yeah,
okay.
Anyway, much love to Felipe Leon.
So there's two more questions I want to get to, and they're both really good. One of them you're going to, knock out of the park, because you're super familiar with Mr. Oppie. Okay, let's do this one first. What is a good summary of Graham Oppie's modal metaphysics, and how does it lead to denying premises and arguments for God? And is there immediate problems with his modal metaphysics? So you'll take that one.
Yeah. So I love modal metaphysics. It's very, very fun. But let's see. He has a view that's called, okay, so firstly, Cameron, so I'm fine with going to like 10 minutes over, to be honest. Like, I'm having fun here, so we could do that if you're cool with that.
Okay.
So, yeah. Graham Oppie has a view that's variously called something like branching actualism, or maybe an Aristotelian powers-based view of modality. It's defended by a lot of people. So arguably this is Kripke's view. Arguably it's a lot of other people's view.
Proust.
Alexander Proust defends it in his 2011 book, Actuality, Possibility, and Worlds. Rob Koons accepts a version of the branching view of modality. Josh Rasmussen is sympathetic to it. I think I might have already said Alex Malpass, but Alex Malpass accepts it. I think it's the best view of modality, so I lean towards it. But I really like the branching view of modality. And what it says is that something is possible just in case it is either actual, or something actual has the causal power to initiate a causal chain leading up to it, essentially. And so you can think of possibilities as kind of branches from the actual world. So that means that every possibility that there could be, every possible world shares an initial history with our world. So you have some kind of initial world segment, which is something that if our universe is past finite, that would be the like initial segment of that. Or if our universe is past infinite, it would be some kind of initial infinite segment, as it were. And then every possible world branches off from the actual world that shares that actual initial segment. So let's say the beginning of the universe was just let's say a particular quantum state, and then it had a 50% objective probability of, giving rise to particle A and a 50% objective probability of giving rise to particle B. Well, you can think of possible worlds as having this branching structure. You have the initial segment of our world, and then all possible worlds share that initial segment, and then possible worlds are possible only insofar as they branch off of this actual world. So you might have a branch going this way, and so that's if, I forget, I think I said particle A is produced, and then maybe particle A goes on to evolve in certain ways, and then there are different branches from its indeterministic causal powers and so on, and so you have branches going that way, and then particle B has different branches and so on, so you get this huge branching structure. Now, this doesn't require you to say that the branches that weren't actually taken, you don't have to say that they like actually exist. So you don't have to say that those other possible worlds are like really real, but rather what you're saying is that their possibility, those possible worlds are possible in virtue of, they're explained by, they're grounded in the causal powers of something that was actual, namely that initial segment, right? There is something that is actual with the causal power of initiating a chain leading up to that possible world. So basically, it's just a branch view of modality. Any possible world, any possible being, any possible object, any possible truth, these things are possible either in virtue of being within the actual world or in virtue of there being something actual with the causal power of being able to produce it, bring it about. Okay, so that's Graham Opies' view. And how does that lead to rejecting certain premises in certain theistic arguments? Well, that just depends on the theistic argument in question. So Oppie is going to want to say that, some people might say that, all of natural reality is contingent. And so there must be some kind of non-natural or supernatural or whatever, some kind of transcendent explanation of why there is this natural reality, because it's contingent. And let's say everything contingent has to have an outside explanation. Graham Oppie is going to reject that because he thinks that, no, it's not the case that everything natural is contingent, because he has this view of modality on which every possible world shares an initial segment with the actual world, and that initial segment for Oppie is natural, and so there's a natural necessary thing, namely this initial segment that's found in every single world, because every single world shares that initial segment, right? So it's a necessary thing. So that's one premise that it would lead him to reject. And there are various other premises that it leads him to reject, but you would just have to take that on a case-by-case basis. And are there immediate problems with this modal metaphysics? So there are a few objections that people can level towards it. One thing is that it kind of limits our modal knowledge quite a lot. Like a possible world, like you might think that you can specify some kind of coherent scenario that doesn't overlap with our possible world. Like maybe the initial state of reality was completely different, right? Maybe there weren't 100 particles in it. Maybe the initial state of reality had like 120 particles or something like that. Now, because that would be a different initial state, there's no way that quote-unquote possible world would be able to share an initial history with our world, because it's a different initial state from our world's initial state. And so that world would actually not be a possible world, because if it were a possible world, they'd have to share an initial segment with our world, but that initial segment is completely different from our world. And so that's actually not a possible world under Graham Oppie's view. And that does kind of severely restrict what we might think was otherwise possible. So that's one potential problem. That's a problem that a bunch of people raise towards, or a bunch of philosophers raise towards these kind of branching views of modality, that they're going to restrict possibilities in a way that we might not want them to be restricted. Now, Oppie's going to say that that's fine. I think, there are responses to that, but that's just one problem that you can raise towards it. And I guess that's one thing that I'll say. That's the only thing that I'll say. There are other problems, but this is not going to be a lecture on modal metaphysics. So,
yeah, no, that was a good summary. Yeah, I don't have much else to add. I'm not the expert on Oppie. I think that if either of us fit that category, it's going to be you. So let's get to this last question then for today from Naho Life. I think that's the way to say his name. He says, what are your thoughts on Dr. Rasmussen's symmetry breaker, the value argument? And if I'm remembering this correctly, this is related to the argument from limits, right? So it's basically saying that anything that is limited in value has some kind of explanation, and that basically leads directly to the idea that the foundation can't have any limit in value because it can't be explained. So do I have this right?
Unfortunately, no.
No. I think this is a version that he's given this version in like a dialogue that I've done with him on the channel on the argument from contingency.
So you're correct. Maybe definitely gives that version.
Okay.
But this is an area this is an argument that I haven't really heard Josh talk much about on any popular forum. It comes from a 2018 paper that he had that he wrote in one of Opies' books. I think Oppie edited a book just called Ontological Arguments, and Josh had an entry in there just entitled Plantinga. That's all that it's entitled. And it was on Plantinga's modal ontological argument. And what Josh did is he traced out Plantinga's argument, traced out the biggest problem for it, namely the symmetry problem. There's a symmetrical reverse modal ontological argument that, hey, possibly God doesn't exist, therefore God doesn't exist by S5. And what Josh did is he offers a new symmetry breaker for that. What he says is he uses a tool called modal uniformity, and I know you've heard of that. And basically it's saying that, hey, if there is a property that admits of degrees, and we know that some degrees of that property are possible, that gives us good reason to think. It's a defeasible reason, so it could be overturned, it could be overruled, but it gives us a good reason, good defeasible reason for thinking that all degrees of that property are possible. Okay, so I'm going to repeat that. He uses this principle, and this is simplifying, but the principle is that if you have a property that admits of degrees, and some degrees of that property are indeed possible, that is possibly instantiated, so in some possible world, something instantiates that property to a certain degree, then all degrees of that property are possibly instantiated. They are possible. And then what he goes on to say is that, well, hey, some degrees of greatness are possible, right? You and I have some kind of degree of greatness, and that's possible. And so using that principle of modal continuity or modal uniformity, we can infer that all degrees of greatness are possible. But since maximal greatness, like, maximal greatness, that's what God would have, since that's a particular degree of greatness, namely the highest possible degree you can have, that's also going to be possible, or at least we have a defeasible reason for thinking that it's possible. And that delivers you the possibility premise in the modal ontological argument. And I mean, that modal uniformity principle is not altogether implausible, right? If like a vase that's 2 inches tall is possible, it would seem to be the case that a vase 4 inches tall is possible, and maybe a vase 12 inches tall is possible, and like 314 inches tall is possible, and so on. So it's kind of plausible. Now, yeah, so what are my thoughts on that? Well, oh my goodness, there are so many different things that I can say. Mamma mia, pizzeria. Let's see. Camerino Bertuzzi. It's okay. People, I'm not trying to be that is just a joke. It is not.
Yes, you are.
Racism. I utterly repudiate racism in all of its forms. So let me just say that. Let's see. So yeah, one thing that's problematic about that, and this is something that Tyron Goldschmidt has pointed out, is like, okay, well, if some degrees of greatness, or if a property admits of some degrees, and those properties, if those degrees are possible, you want to say that all degrees are possible. But like, you can just mount the symmetry argument yet again, right? You can just say, well, hey, I can use a symmetrical principle. If we have a property that admits of degrees, and some of those degrees are possibly absent from reality, well, then all the degrees are possibly absent from reality, right? That's a modal uniformity that's licensed by the exact same principle, or at least the same motivations that led Josh to his principle. And moreover, we know that some degrees of greatness are possibly absent from reality, right? Perhaps humans never evolved. Then whatever degree of greatness is associated with humans would have been absent from reality, or maybe maybe nothing conscious ever came to be, or maybe God didn't, if we assume God exists, maybe God didn't create anything other than God, in which case a whole host of degrees of greatness would not be actual, and hence they are possibly non-existent. And so if some degrees of greatness are possibly non-existent, by the modal uniformity that Josh used, it's going to follow that all degrees of greatness are possibly non-existent, in which case maximal greatness is possibly non-existent, and you support the reverse premise of the modal ontological argument. So it doesn't seem to ultimately support one premise over and above the other, in which case it's not really a symmetry breaker. So that's one problem that's been raised towards it. There are some other problems, but I think that that's probably sufficient. I mean, and I guess, okay, finally, I guess one thing that you could say is like, you would seem to be able to entail the possibility of like really, really, really bad things, right? So like if some degrees of evil and so on are possible, well then are all degrees of evil possible? And if so, that might itself pose a challenge to theism, because you'd think that like something that's like maximally evil, it's hard to see how God could allow that to obtain. But anyway, yeah, that's all I'll say with respect to that argument. It's an interesting and innovative argument, but ultimately I'm not convinced by it. But
yeah, so I definitely was not familiar with that argument. And I hope that's the one that he's referring to. I mean, maybe the value argument is maybe that's the exact one. Like there is no other. Okay, there is no other.
It is his symmetry breaker, and he calls it the value argument in that paper called Planninga. So.
Okay. All right. There you go. Okay. Two last super chats that were sent in, and these are not questions. They're not questions. This one said, "I love how well you handled Canadian Catholic." Feel free to not respond to that if you don't want to.
No, I mean, I could say that, like, listen, when I'm in conversations with people with whom I disagree, I try to, my number one priority in those is not to win. It's not even to make good philosophical points. It's to be respectful. That's what I try to do when I'm in a conversation with someone with whom I disagree. Of course, I'm not perfect at that, right? But I at least hope that, I come across as respectful, because that's my number one goal in conversations with people with whom I disagree. It's to be respectful, and it's to at least try to serve people. So, I try to keep as cool a head as possible. Sometimes it's difficult when you're dealing with what's the word?
Certain people.
Dealing with suboptimal conditions. That's all I'm going to say is suboptimal conditions. So, but it could be difficult. But anyway, I think that that's something that I try to take to heart. Just my number one priority is be respectful, not even to make good points, not to win, not to beat the other person, but to be respectful and try to love, essentially. So, and again, I'm not perfect at that. I have failed at that, and I fail daily. But at least you can try.
Yeah, you sound like a Christian. Okay, here's a Venerage. Venerage says, no questions, just wanted to say I love you both. I love you too, Venerage.
Much love.
Yeah, okay, that is gonna do it for us today. That was a lot of fun, and we went just a little bit over, but you said it was okay, so I'm gonna just assume that it was like actually okay. Some people dude, some people, they're like, okay, I can go for an hour and like that's it, and I want to respect that because they're coming on the show. Everybody's come on so far for free, and I'm like, I want to respect their time. They're like dedicating. So, anyways, I just I want to be sensitive to that. So. Yeah, but it was a lot of fun. I'm sad, though, Joe, and I'm a little disappointed that we didn't hear any accents today.
You got a little bit of one, didn't you? I mean, at some points.
At the very end, maybe. Bertuzzi. That's about all we got.
Yeah.
That is to say.
That is to say. I've got a little bit of a COVID voice, so okay. I purposely make that one a little bit exaggerated, right? I recognize that Swinburne does not go up again like that.
A little bit exaggerated.
Yeah, so it's
slightly,
but yeah, I mean, the probability of God's existence conditional on fine tuning. That is to say, the permissibility of. I can't even do it with a straight face. Oh man.
No, you can't. Okay. Anyways.
Substance has properties, and those various properties are its various observable features. And
did you watch his recent debate?
Oh no, with Peter Milliken, I haven't seen it yet.
It's good. I mean, it's only an hour long, which is kind of sucky.
He's
but
like
it was
87, and he's still going strong. It's like, dude,
I don't understand
you're an
it.
idol, man. It's like
I
want to
understand
be
it,
you, man.
Dude, I mean, I interviewed him in person, and it was like the most intimidating interview I've ever done in my life. He's just that intelligent.
When I had him on my channel, it was kind of scary. And like when he answered the call, I'm like, hello, Dr. Swinburne. I'm like,
hello.
Whoa.
And he's just like sitting there probably just like, okay, go.
Hello, how are you? Yes, a substance has various properties. And...
okay. Yeah. Anyways,
are we bodies or cells?
This has been a lot of fun. I know we could actually go all day, couldn't we?
Major,
but this is that was going to be one of the titles. Timeless,
immaterial, enormously
powerful.
Major.
All right, we got to end the stream. We kind of have to, but let me just do one more plug. If you enjoyed this today and you really enjoyed Joe, which I did, I mean, I learned a lot from him today. Go check out his channel, Majesty of Reason. Go listen to his stuff. I mean, that's actually what I do when I like mow the grass and stuff. Is I listen to Joe and the people that he has on too. I mean, he produces his own really good videos, but he also has like really good interviews that he does with people. And just like Parker, like he's actively by Parker I mean Parker Sedicase. So like go check out his channel as well. But I really get a lot of a lot out of people who are like actively doing things in the field. I feel like that's what Parker's doing. Like he's getting his degrees, PhD candidate. Same with Joe. It's like, at least I assume that's the case with Parker. Maybe I'm just like not remembering that. Is that you probably know more about him than I do. Is he getting his PhD? I want to make sure that I'm not saying that wrong.
Okay, well, I thought he was, but now you're calling my own memory into question. So
either way, he's like a student, and he's like actively like he's writing papers and stuff. So like the point is that someone who is actively in the field, like doing stuff, reading and like going to school, and like I get a lot out of people who are doing that and interviewing from their position where they're at and where they're currently learning. So that's like, I just personally get a whole lot out of it. And if you got something out of this today, you'll probably get something out of his channel as well. Go check out his channel. And Joe, thanks for coming back on. It's been awesome.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
All right, and we will see you guys in the next video, which is coming up very soon. So see you guys soon. Hey, it's me again. Actually, don't leave yet. I've got something super, super important to tell you. So first of all, you're awesome. Like you just watched a really, really long video just now, and you're still watching it. That is actually pretty amazing. Secondly, we have hundreds, literally hundreds of other apologetics related videos for you to watch on our channel. Go check them out. I've interviewed exorcists, hosted debates between Christians and atheists. I've even made response videos to atheists. All of that is available on our channel. Go check it out. Third, I rely on people that see value in my work, people like you that watch videos to the very end, to keep the lights on around here. Literally